Tonight the wind presses its cold palms against an ancient castle, and a single torch flickers beside a gate no one wants to guard. A young squire steps into the darkness, believing this watch will earn him honor by dawn, yet whispers say no one lasts that long. Before we begin, take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, whether it's late evening in the US, early morning in Europe, a quiet night in Canada, or another corner of the world, and what time has brought you here. Settle your shoulders, loosen your jaw, dim the lights, and let your breath slow as you prepare to drift into this gentle, unfolding tale. The young squire's name was Ulrich, and the first bell of watch had only just finished echoing through the stone corridors when he reached the gate. It was an old gate, older than the banners, older than the stories carved into the chapel walls. Its oak planks darkened by centuries of rain and smoke. Iron bands ran across it like ribs, cold to the touch, smelling faintly of rust and oil. Ulrich rested his palm there for a moment, as if the gate itself might steady him. Above, the towers loomed in patient silence. The moon slipped between clouds, painting the courtyard in silver that felt thin and fragile, like ice over deep water. Somewhere within the castle, a door closed softly. Somewhere else, a fireside as it settled into embers. These were comforting sounds, proof of life, of warmth, but they seemed far away now, as if he had stepped into a pocket of quiet the rest of the world had forgotten. Ulrich adjusted his cloak, pulling it tighter around his shoulders. The wool was coarse but familiar, smelling of lanolin and the smoke from the barracks hearth. He had been a squire for 3 years, long enough to polish armor until it shone like water, long enough to hold a shield steady while knights trained, long enough to dream of the day he would earn his spurs. Guarding the gate for one night felt like a test meant just for him. A simple watch before the dawn. The torch beside the gate crackled, its flame bending in the breeze. Shadows stretched and shrank across the stones, making the carvings at Ulrich's feet seem to stir. He told himself it was only the light, only the night air playing tricks. He counted his breaths, slow and even, the way the old quartermaster had taught him. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Each breath made a small cloud in the cold, yet beneath the calm there was something else, a faint unease, like a distant drumbeat felt more than heard. Ulrich had noticed it earlier at supper, when the hall had grown strangely quiet as he took his bowl. No one had met his eyes. A knight had muttered a blessing under his breath as Ulrich passed. The captain's order had been brief, almost hurried. Guard the gate. Do not leave your post until dawn. He shifted his weight, boots scraping softly on stone worn smooth by generations of footsteps. Outside the gate, beyond the moat and the dark fields, the land lay still. No owls called, no dogs barked. Even the wind seemed to hold itself back, as if listening. Ulrich tightened his grip on his spear and told himself stories of heroes who stood watch alone, of dawn breaking clean and golden after the longest night. The gate stood firm behind him. The torch burned steady. For now, the world felt held in balance, waiting. As the minutes lengthened and the torch burned lower, Ulrich began to notice the gate itself breathing. Not truly breathing, of course, yet the stone around him seemed to release a slow, patient sigh, as if the castle were settling deeper into the earth for the night. The air grew cooler, carrying with it the scent of damp moss and old iron. Ulrich shifted again, feeling the chill creep through the soles of his boots and up into his legs. He traced the edge of a carving with his boot toe, following the worn outline of a knight etched into the flagstones. The face had long since been smoothed away, leaving only a suggestion of helm and shoulders. So many before me, Ulrich thought, the idea oddly comforting. If others had stood here, then surely he could as well. A faint sound brushed his ears, so soft it might have been imagination, a murmur like voices heard through thick walls. Ulrich held his breath. The sound faded, then returned, threading itself through the cracks between stones. It wasn't loud enough to make out words, only the gentle rise and fall of something that felt like speech, remembered rather than spoken. He told himself it was the wind moving through the gate's ironwork. He had heard stranger sounds in the stables at night, horses shifting, chains clinking, wood popping as it cooled. Still, his fingers tightened on the spear shaft, feeling the smoothness worn there by countless hands. The torchlight flickered, and for a heartbeat the shadows at the base of the gate seemed deeper, thicker, as though the darkness itself had weight. Ulrich leaned closer, peering into the narrow seam where the gate met the wall. From there came a cool draught, smelling of earth and time, carrying with it the faintest echo of a sigh. He straightened quickly, forcing a small, steady breath. "Just the night," he whispered, the words sounding too loud in the quiet. Saying them made him feel less alone, as if the stones might hear and agree. Somewhere within the castle, a distant bell chimed, marking another quarter hour past. The sound drifted through the corridors and dissolved into the open air above the courtyard. Ulrich counted the chimes, nodding to himself. Time was moving. Dawn would come. It always did. Yet, as the bell's echo faded, the murmurs returned, closer now, curling round the gate like fog, not threatening, not pleading, simply present. Ulrich closed his eyes for a moment and focused on the slow rhythm of his breathing, letting the quiet wash over him like a tide that rose and fell without harm. The gate remained closed, the torch burned on, and the night, unhurried and watchful, continued to unfold. The night deepened, folding in on itself like layers of dark cloth. The moon climbed higher, then drifted behind a veil of clouds, leaving the courtyard dim and blue-gray. Ulrich rolled his shoulders gently, easing the stiffness from standing so long in one place. Each movement felt louder than it should have, the soft scrape of leather and wool echoing faintly off the walls. He began to pace only a few steps in either direction, never straying far from the gate. The stones beneath his feet were cool and smooth, their edges softened by centuries of use. With each step, his thoughts wandered, slow and meandering. He remembered his first day as a squire, the way his hands had trembled as he buckled the knight's greaves. He remembered the warmth of the kitchens at dawn, the smell of bread rising, the laughter that came easily when the sun was up. Those memories felt distant now, like stories told in another life. Outside the gate, the darkness pressed close. Ulrich tried to see beyond it, to imagine the fields and the road leading away from the castle. But the night swallowed everything, leaving only the suggestion of space. The world felt smaller here, narrowed to torchlight and stone, breath and heartbeat. A soft creak drifted down from above wood, shifting in a tower, perhaps, or a shutter nudged by the breeze. Ulrich paused, listening. His pulse quickened for a moment, then slowed again when nothing followed. He found himself smiling faintly at his own nerves. Of course, no one lasts past dawn, he thought wryly. They let their minds wander too far in the dark. He leaned his spear against the wall and stretched his fingers, flexing them until warmth returned. The stone was cold through his glove, yet solid, reassuring. This castle had stood through wars and winters. It knew the language of night. Whatever secrets it held, it was not about to yield them all at once. Time passed in small, nearly invisible increments. The torch burned lower, its flame shortening and brightening as it fed on the last of its oil. Shadows grew longer, softer at the edges. Ulrich felt his eyelids grow heavy, and he fought the urge to close them. focusing instead on the quiet pattern of his breath. Then, faint as a memory, the murmuring returned this time, not from the gate, but from the walls around him. It seemed to move as he moved, never quite in one place. Not words, not a warning, more like a chorus of distant sighs, rising and falling together. Ulrich stood still, letting the sound wash over him. Strangely, it did not frighten him. There was a tiredness to it, a longing that felt old and worn smooth. He rested his forehead briefly against the cool stone and exhaled, as if answering the sound with one of his own. Above him, unseen, the night continued its slow turning. Midnight crept closer, unannounced, carried on quiet feet. Midnight arrived without ceremony. No bell marked it, no shout from the towers. It simply was, settling over the castle like a deep, steady breath. The torch guttered, then steadied again, casting a warmer glow that seemed almost kind. Ulrich drew his cloak closer and felt the quiet shift, as though the night had leaned in. The murmurs grew clearer, not louder, but closer to meaning. They flowed through the stone beneath his boots, up through his legs, a gentle vibration rather than a sound. Ulrich closed his eyes, just for a heartbeat, and listened with something deeper than his ears. The castle felt awake now, not in a sudden or startling way, but like an old guardian who had opened one eye to see who stood watch. Images drifted through his mind unbidden, other squires standing where he stood, their faces pale in torchlight, knights in mail, shoulders bowed with weariness, hands pressed to the same cold stone, seeking reassurance. He sensed their patience, their resolvent, their exhaustion. None of them felt angry or afraid. They felt spent, as though they had poured everything they were into the long hours of darkness. Ulrich swallowed, his throat dry. "I'm here," he murmured, not sure why he spoke at all. The words were simple, almost childlike, yet saying them brought a strange calm. The murmurs softened, settling into a low, steady hum that matched his breathing. A chill breeze slipped through the narrow seam of the gate, carrying the smell of earth and distant rain. With it came a feeling, not a command, not a threat, but an understanding. This watch was not about keeping enemies out. The gate was already strong, the walls already high. This was a different kind of guarding, one that asked for stillness rather than strength. Ulrich straightened, spear held lightly now, no longer braced for a charge that would never come. He felt the weight of the night pass through him like water, cool and steady, leaving him grounded rather than drained. The stone at his back seemed warmer, as if acknowledging his presence. Somewhere far beyond the walls, a cloud moved aside and the moon returned, spilling pale light across the courtyard. The shadows shifted gently, no longer crowding the gate but stretching away, giving space. Ulrich breathed in slowly, then out again, each breath an unspoken promise to remain. The castle watched with him. The night, patient and vast, continued its slow unfolding toward dawn. The hours after midnight carried a different kind of quiet, deeper, heavier, yet somehow less lonely. Ulrich felt it settle over him like a thick cloak, warm despite its weight. He stood with his back to the gate now, letting the solid oak and iron support him, trusting it as one trusts a familiar wall in the dark. The murmurs had faded into something gentler, almost like a lullaby woven into the stone. In their place came impressions, slow and unhurried. Ulrich sensed footsteps that had crossed this courtyard long ago, worn grooves in the stone that matched no living stride. He imagined hands, rough and careful, pushing the gate closed night after night, sealing the world outside until morning. A feeling of gratitude stirred in his chest, not his own, exactly, but close enough to recognize. It flowed through him quietly, asking nothing in return. Ulrich's shoulders relaxed as he let it pass, as natural as breathing. The torch finally burned down to a glowing stub, its flame shrinking until it was little more than a steady ember. The courtyard dimmed, bathed now in moonlight and shadow. Ulrich did not rush to replace it. The darkness no longer felt empty. It felt shared. From the wall beside him came a faint warmth, as if the stone remembered all those who had leaned there before. Ulrich rested his palm against it, feeling the texture pitted, uneven, alive with history. He wondered how many nights it had listened, how many silent vows it had held. Time stretched, unmarked and gentle. Ulrich found his thoughts slowing, smoothing out like water over pebbles. The fear he had carried at the start of his watch had thinned to a distant echo. In its place was a quiet resolve, simple and steady, to be here, to last, to greet the dawn when it came. Far above, a star slipped behind drifting cloud. Somewhere within the castle, a sleeper turned in their bed, unaware of the watch being kept for them. Ulrich smiled faintly, comforted by the thought. The night pressed on, but it no longer felt endless. It felt purposeful, like a long road that curved gently toward light. Sometime later, how much later, Ulrich could not have said, the cold returned, softer than before, brushing his skin like a reminder rather than a threat. He shifted his stance, rolling his ankles, letting blood flow back into his feet. The simple movement felt grounding, anchoring him in his own body after so long drifting in thought. The courtyard lay utterly still. Moonlight traced pale lines along the stones, revealing cracks filled with shadow and time. The gate behind him no longer felt like a barrier, but like a presence, quiet, steady, observant. Ulrich became aware of a subtle pressure in the air, as if the night itself were watching him, not with judgment, but with curiosity. This, he realized, was the test. Not a clash of steel, not shouted orders or charging foes, but endurance, attention, the ability to remain present when nothing happened. When the mind longed to wander, to flee into dreams or memories, the watch demanded gentleness and return, again and again. A wave of weariness passed through him, heavier than before. His eyelids fluttered, and for a moment the world softened at the edges. Ulrich inhaled slowly, deeply, filling his lungs until his chest rose beneath his cloak. He exhaled, just as slowly, letting the breath carry the heaviness away without fighting it. The murmurs stirred again, not many voices now, but one broad, quiet presence, like the echo of 100 heartbeats layered into one. With it came understanding, wordless and calm. Those who failed did not fall to fear, but to forgetting themselves. They pushed too hard. They resisted the night instead of resting within it. Ulrich loosened his grip on the spear. He let it stand beside him, held more by balance than force. He leaned lightly against the stone and allowed his breath to find its own rhythm. The night responded, easing, like a tide that had only been testing the shore. Above the walls, the sky lightened almost imperceptibly, not with dawn yet, but with the promise of it. Ulrich did not look for it. He simply remained, steady and awake, in a quiet way that did not exhaust him. The castle seemed to settle, satisfied for now. The test continued, but Ulrich no longer felt alone in it. The night thinned into something strange and fluid, neither fully awake nor fully dreaming. Ulrich noticed how time no longer moved in clear steps, but in long, drifting currents. A breath could feel like a minute could pass like a sigh. He did not fight it. He let himself float within it, alert yet unstrained. A faint mist began to gather in the courtyard, curling low along the stones. It moved slowly, respectfully, as if it knew this place belonged to silence. The mist softened the edges of everything it touched, the base of the towers, the curve of the walls, even the gate itself. The castle looked less like a fortress now, and more like a memory rising from the earth. Ulrich watched the mist with quiet curiosity. It reminded him of early mornings in the fields near his childhood home, when the world felt gentle and unfinished, waiting for the sun to decide its shape. That memory brought a warmth to his chest, small but steady, like a coal carefully kept alive. The murmurs returned only faintly, woven so deeply into the stillness that they felt more like thoughts than sounds. They did not pull at him. They simply passed through, leaving behind a sense of companionship. Ulrich understood now why no one spoke of this watch in detail. Words would only harden what needed to remain soft. He shifted his weight once more, careful and slow. His body ached in distant, manageable waste-proof that he was still present, still human. The ache did not trouble him. It grounded him, like the feel of the spear's wood beneath his fingers, smooth and familiar. Far above, the clouds began to thin. A single star emerged, faint but persistent, holding its place in the dark. Ulrich lifted his gaze to it for a moment, and felt a quiet reassurance settle over him. The world was still turning. Dawn was not rushing, but it was coming. He returned his attention to the gate, to the stone, to his breath. The watch continued, unbroken, carried forward by patience rather than force. The night, sensing his steadiness, remained calm. As the hours wore on, the silence changed once more, not growing deeper, but clearer, like water settling after a long disturbance. Ulrich sensed it before he understood it, a gentle clarity spreading through the courtyard. The mist thinned and drifted away, leaving the stones cool and bare beneath the moonlight. He realized then that the night was no longer testing him, it was teaching. Each sound stood alone now, the soft rasp of his breath, the faint creak of leather when he shifted, the distant, patient murmur of the wind along the battlements. None of these sounds demanded attention. They simply were, inviting him to notice without effort. Ulrich rested both hands on the spear, not for support, but for familiarity. The wood felt warmer now, shaped to his grip. He imagined all the quiet watches it had shared with others, all the still moments it had witnessed. The thought made him feel part of something wide and enduring, a line stretching backward through time. The gate behind him seemed almost to hum, a low resonance that settled into his bones. It carried no urgency. It spoke of thresholds, of standing between what was known and what was not, and of the calm required to hold that space without fear. A subtle light began to touch the highest stones of the towers, not dawn yet, but a soft easing of darkness, like the sky loosening its grip. Ulrich noticed it without excitement. There was no rush. The night would release him when it was ready. He breathed in, slow and full, and let the breath out even slower. With it went the last tight knot of expectation. He was no longer counting the hours. He was simply keeping the watch, as it had always been meant to be kept. The castle seemed to approve, settling into a deep, restful stillness, and Ulrich, steady and calm, remained at the gate. Section 9. Before the first light, the sky began to change so slowly it was almost impossible to see. Darkness did not fleet, softened, thinning at the edges like ink diluted with water. Ulrich sensed the shift in his bones before his eyes fully caught it. The night was loosening its hold. A pale band of grey touched the horizon beyond the walls, barely there, like a held breath. The courtyard remained hushed, wrapped in a gentle stillness that felt earned. Ulrich stood taller without realizing it, his spine lengthening as if drawn upward by the promise of morning. The gate behind him felt different now. Where it had once carried weight and depth, it now felt light, its task nearly complete. The stone beneath his palm was cool and calm, no longer murmuring, simply resting. Whatever had passed through the night had passed cleanly, leaving no trace of strain. Ulrich noticed how awake he felt, not sharp or tense, but clear. His thoughts moved slowly, unknotted. The ache in his legs had softened to a distant awareness. Even the chill seemed kinder, more like morning air than night's cold. From within the castle came the faintest stir of footstep far away, the whisper of a door opening somewhere deep inside. Life was beginning to stretch, unaware of how carefully it had been guarded. Ulrich smiled at that, a small, private expression. The sky brightened another shade. The first hint of color touched the clouds, not gold yet, but a promise of it. Ulrich remained still, honoring the last moments of darkness, letting them finish their work. He had not fought the night, he had listened to it, and in doing so, he had learned how to remain. The horizon now carried a gentle glow, pale and diffuse, as if the night were exhaling the last of its shadows. Ulrich felt it first in his chest, a quiet lifting, subtle and warm. The torch beside the gate had long since burned to nothing, leaving only the rising light and the lingering scent of smoke. He shifted his weight, standing straighter, allowing the muscles in his legs to stretch after hours of careful stillness. The courtyard no longer felt vast and empty. It felt spacious in a soft, comfortable way, as though it had been waiting patiently for this moment of quiet release. Every stone, every iron bar, every carving seemed to shimmer faintly under the growing light. Ulrich let his gaze wander to the horizon, where the first rays of sun hesitated, gentle and tentative. The grey sky began to hold whispers of peach and soft pink. The air smelled sweeter now, like dew and soil, and the promise of a new day. Even the chill in the morning breeze seemed welcoming, brushing his face lightly rather than cutting. For the first time since he had taken his post, Ulrich felt entirely calm. There had been tension, yes, and weariness, but now they were gone, replaced by something expansive and quiet, like a sigh released into the morning. The gate, the courtyard, the castle itself, they had guided him through the night, teaching patience, attention, and the power of stillness. A faint bird call drifted from the nearby trees, tentative and musical. Ulrich inhaled, letting the sound fill the space around him. The castle remained silent, dignified, as if acknowledging his watch completed without fanfare. There was no applause, no visible reward, only the subtle, enduring sense of having endured, having been present, having learned. The young squire felt a smile tug at his lips. This was the reward, the quiet knowledge that he had stood steadfast, that he had been part of a long line of guardians, and that dawn had come not with a clash of swords, but with calm, gentle certainty. Ulrich exhaled slowly, letting the morning fill him completely. The shadows receded, and the world, patient and unchanged, awaited its next day. The first light of dawn stretched across the courtyard, soft and delicate, painting the towers and walls in shades of honey and pale grey. Ulrich lowered his spear, feeling its weight now more familiar than ever, and allowed his gaze to travel slowly over the stones he had stood upon all night. Each one seemed to glow faintly in the early sun, telling a story he could almost understand. A breeze stirred, carrying the scent of wet earth and fresh grass from beyond the moat. Ulrich breathed it in deeply, letting it wash away the final threads of night's chill. The air felt alive, vibrant, and he realized he had never noticed how much he had taken for granted: the simple rhythm of day and night, the subtle changes, the quiet transitions that required attention to appreciate fully. From the castle's inner walls came movement. A door creaked, boots padded softly across stone, and somewhere a bell rang faintly, announcing that another day had begun. Ulrich watched, feeling a sense of connection to the life resuming around him. He was no longer separate from it, no longer on the edge of fear and uncertainty. He had been part of something larger, invisible yet steady. The gate loomed behind him, no longer an object of dread, but a companion that had kept him company through the long hours. He ran his hand over the iron bands once more, appreciating their cool firmness. So many hands had touched them before, and now his had too, joining a lineage of quiet endurance. Ulrich's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning to cast long golden fingers across the courtyard. The shadows he had watched all night had melted into warmth, and the world seemed, for the first time since he had arrived, gentle and forgiving. Even the murmurs that had haunted him were gone, leaving only a calm understanding, like a story concluded without words. He inhaled one last deep, steady breath, letting it fill him completely. He could feel the night's lessons embedded in his body, the patience, the vigilance, the quiet courage that had carried him through. Dawn was not merely a light, it was a reward, a quiet acknowledgement that he had endured, that he had been present, and that the castle, in its slow, patient way, had accepted him. The world was waking now, soft and warm, and Ulrich knew he would never forget this night. The castle slowly came alive around him. From the distant kitchens, the faint clatter of pans and the low murmur of voices drifted through the corridors, blending with the soft whisper of the morning breeze. Ulrich allowed himself to notice it fully, the rhythms of a world beginning to stir after a long night of stillness. The sound was comforting, a gentle reminder that life continued outside the walls he had guarded. Birds began to call from the treetops beyond the moat, their songs hesitant at first, then gradually more confident. Ulrich tilted his head, letting their melodies drift over him. He realized that he had been holding his own breath without noticing, and he let it out slowly, releasing the tension that had lingered despite his calm composure. The night's weight was fading, replaced by a new awareness of movement, warmth, and sound. He walked slowly along the edge of the gate, feeling the cold iron under his fingers and the smooth stone beneath his boots. The courtyard no longer felt vast and empty. Instead, it seemed alive with echoes of those who had stood watch before him, each step in the stone a whisper of endurance and quiet courage. For the first time, Ulrich noticed the small details. The way the morning light reflected off moss in the cracks, the faint patterns etched into the stones by centuries of rain, the subtle warmth in the stones that had absorbed the night's chill and now held the memory of his vigil. From the upper towers came movement. A window slid open, a figure stretching after the night's rest. The sounds were soft, patient, and they reminded Ulrich that the night's solitude had not been isolation. He had shared it with the castle itself, with its stones, its walls, its iron gates, and with all those who had kept watch before him. The horizon was now streaked with gold, the promise of a day fully awakening. Ulrich allowed himself a quiet smile. He had done what no one had thought possible for a young squire on his first night alone. He had endured, and he had learned. The castle had shared its secret, not with fear or force, but with patience, attention, and a steady heart. He leaned against the gate one last time, feeling the familiar firmness under his palm. The world was waking, and so was he, carrying with him the quiet understanding that would stay with him far beyond this single night. The light continued to grow, gentle yet insistent, spilling across the courtyard and climbing the sides of the towers. Ulrich took a slow step back from the gate, feeling the warmth of the sun touch the back of his neck through his cloak. It was a subtle comfort, the first sensation of reassurance after a long night of shadows and whispers. The air was filled with quiet sounds, the distant clatter of the kitchens, the flutter of birds' wings, and the faint creak of shutters opening in the castle's upper chambers. Each sound felt deliberate and patient, like the castle itself was breathing a deep, measured sigh after the long watch of night. Ulrich listened, noting the gentle rhythm, and allowed his own heartbeat to slow in time with it. He ran his fingers lightly over the cold iron of the gate. Now it seemed almost alive, softened by the first touches of morning light, and Ulrich felt a deep sense of gratitude toward the inanimate companion that had carried him through the darkness. The courtyard seemed almost to stretch under the growing light, the long shadows retreating until only a few remained, thin and delicate. Ulrich walked slowly along the edge, noticing every detail: the rough edges of the stones worn smooth by countless feet, the faint traces of moss and lichen in the cracks, the tiny chips in the iron bands of the gate that spoke of years of use and endurance. Above him, a soft breeze drifted through the towers, carrying with it the faint scent of morning dew and the earth beyond the moat. Ulrich inhaled deeply, letting the air fill him completely, feeling the tension of the night drain away. The castle was waking, and he was waking with it, carrying a quiet pride that came not from words or recognition, but from knowing he had faced the night fully, patiently, and with courage. The first warmth of the sun touched his hands as he rested them once more on the gate. Ulrich smiled softly. The night had passed, and with it, a lesson that would linger in him like the memory of a song that never truly ends. Ulrich remained near the gate, watching as the morning light crept higher, spilling across the courtyard in soft ribbons of gold. The castle walls, dark and solemn all night, now glowed with warmth. Each stone seemed to hold a memory of countless nights, just like this one, standing watch in patient endurance. Ulrich's fingers brushed along the iron bands, feeling the faint warmth left by the rising sun. The metal was no longer cold, and it seemed almost to pulse gently, as if acknowledging his vigilance. The castle itself felt alive in the morning. From distant corridors came the shuffle of feet and the soft murmur of voices, guards stretching, servants beginning their daily tasks, a bell tolling in a far-off tower. The sounds were calm, measured, never rushed. Ulrich listened with quiet appreciation, letting the rhythm of activity fill him with a sense of belonging. He had been part of the night, and now he was part of the day. Birds called from the trees outside the moat, their songs rising in brightness as the sun reached higher. Ulrich tilted his head, listening to the delicate melodies. The night's whispers had faded completely, leaving only the soft hum of life. The castle had taught him to wait, to breathe, to endure, and now it seemed to offer silent praise for a watch kept with patience. Ulrich's cloak hung loosely from his shoulders, and he felt the stiffness of hours spent standing slowly melt away. He shifted his weight and stretched, taking in the familiar courtyard with fresh eyes. Every stone, every iron hinge, every carved figure in the walls seemed to carry a quiet acknowledgement, a story of guardianship that had carried him through the night. He exhaled, a long, slow release of air, and felt lighter for it. The torch that had burned beside the gate was nothing but ashes now, but its memory lingered in the warmth of the stones and the faint scent of smoke. The night had passed, and with it, a transformation. Ulrich was no longer just a young squire. He was a witness, a keeper, and a part of the castle's enduring history. The courtyard basked in the soft morning light, peaceful and untroubled. Ulrich rested his hand one last time on the gate, feeling its strength and presence. The world was awake, the night had yielded, and the lesson of the long hours lingered gently in his chest. The courtyard glowed now, bathed in the first true light of morning. Shadows that had stretched and twisted through the night lay diminished and pale across the stone. Ulrich felt the warmth of the sun touch his face, delicate at first, then stronger, yet never harsh. The chill of the night receded, leaving a gentle comfort that seeped into his shoulders, his arms, and the soles of his boots. A breeze drifted through the courtyard, carrying scents of damp earth, morning dew, and faint smoke from the kitchen hearths. Ulrich inhaled slowly, letting the fragrance fill him entirely. The sensations were subtle but profound. The rough texture of the stone beneath his fingers, the smooth iron of the gate, the soft caress of sunlight on his cloak. Everything felt alive, heightened, as if the world had paused during the night to teach him attentiveness. He walked slowly, carefully, tracing the edges of the courtyard. Each step revealed details he had not noticed in the dim hours. A tiny crack filled with moss, a worn groove in the stone from countless feet, a carved figure whose outline was softened by centuries of weather. Each was a quiet testament to time, endurance, and presence, lessons that he carried as carefully as the spear that rested beside him. Birds flitted across the sky, their calls ringing clear in the fresh air. A distant bell tolled, marking the hour, and the castle began to stir more fully. Footsteps echoed down corridors, a door opened with a soft creak, and somewhere a kettle whistled faintly. Ulrich noticed these sounds not as distractions, but as part of the rhythm of life, the world resuming in gentle harmony after the long night. He returned to the gate, resting his palm on the iron bands, feeling the heat of the morning gather in their surface. The night had tested him, challenged him, and left its mark, but the morning rewarded him with clarity, presence, and calm. Ulrich smiled softly, understanding that this was not merely the end of a watch, but a beginning, a quiet acknowledgement from the castle itself. Ulrich breathed deeply, savoring the sensation of completeness, of having endured, and of being ready to greet the day fully awake. Ulrich lingered by the gate a moment longer, feeling the warmth of the morning seep through the iron and stone. Every fiber of his being felt alert, yet serene as stillness earned through hours of quiet vigilance. The courtyard, now fully awake in sunlight, seemed almost to exhale, the shadows retreating to reveal the subtle textures of its centuries-old stones. He finally lifted his gaze to the road beyond the gate, imagining the world waiting outside. The moat glimmered faintly in the sunlight, and the distant fields stretched softly toward the horizon, bathed in pale gold. Everything felt gentle, untouched, yet brimming with life. The thought of stepping beyond the familiar walls was not intimidating. It was an invitation, a quiet acknowledgement that he had endured the night and was now ready for movement, for possibility. Ulrich's boots echoed softly on the stone as he moved a few steps away from the gate. The air smelled of dew, moss, and distant wildflowers, delicate yet persistent. Even the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze felt like a companion rather than a distraction. Every sense seemed heightened, attuned to small details. The way the sunlight caught the edges of the carvings in the walls, the faint warmth left by the stones on his hands, the gentle hum of the castle settling into day. He paused halfway across the courtyard, allowing his eyes to linger on the gate. Though the night had been long and tested him in ways he could only now fully appreciate, he realized he felt a connection to it, not fear, not burden, but respect and gratitude. The gate had been his steadfast companion, and now it stood quiet, proud, a sentinel that had shared its secret of endurance. From the upper tower, a flag stirred lazily in the morning breeze, its edges kissed by sunlight. The castle began to breathe, more fully, guards preparing for patrols, cooks calling softly to one another, a bell in the distance marking the start of labor and life. Ulrich absorbed it all, allowing the rhythm of activity to weave gently into him, blending seamlessly with the calm he had cultivated through the night. He took a slow, steady breath, feeling his chest rise and fall with a deep, measured calm. Today, The world was awake, and so was he. The night had ended, but its lessons lingered, quiet and enduring, like sunlight warming cold stone. Ulrich walked slowly across the courtyard, each step deliberate, savoring the sensation of stone beneath his boots, now warmed by the morning sun. The gates behind him remained steadfast, silent witnesses to his vigil, their iron bands glowing faintly in the light. He could feel the pulse of the castle beneath him, subtle and steady, as though it had settled into the day just as he had. From the inner walls came soft stirrings, the scrape of broom on stone, the low murmur of a baker arranging his morning bread, and the distant clink of a bell as another tower began to mark the hours. The castle, which had seemed vast and lonely in the darkness, now felt alive and communal, each sound a gentle heartbeat in the larger rhythm of life. Ulrich paused to watch a servant descend a stairwell, carrying a tray of steaming water and fresh bread. The smell drifted faintly to him, comforting and grounding, connecting him to the world beyond the night's vigil. He inhaled slowly, appreciating the quiet ordinariness of this morning, contrast to the weight and stillness of the hours he had kept alone. The courtyard's shadows had softened completely, retreating into the corners and crevices of the walls. Light washed over the moss-covered stones, revealing their texture and age. Ulrich ran his hand lightly along the edge of a carved figure, feeling the grooves smoothed by centuries of hands. Every detail seemed alive, a testament to endurance, patience, and continuity. He stepped closer to the gate again, taking in the sight of the iron bands and oak planks, now gleaming softly in the sun. The night's whispers, the murmurs that had traveled through stone and shadow, were gone, replaced by a serene stillness that felt almost like praise. Ulrich understood now that the castle had guided him gently, teaching him the quiet power of vigilance, attention, and calm endurance. As he stood there, the wind stirred the banners atop the towers, their edges flicking softly. Ulrich smiled, feeling a sense of completion, a quiet pride, and a deep, steady connection to the place that had tested him so fully. The morning was here, alive, with movement and warmth, and he was ready to step fully into it, carrying the lessons of the night like a treasured companion. The sun climbed slowly, spilling golden light across the castle walls and illuminating the courtyard in a gentle, steady warmth. Ulrich lingered near the gate for a moment, feeling the weight of the night lift from his shoulders. The air smelled faintly of wet stone, dew, and the distant fields beyond the moat, all mingling into a subtle perfume of morning. He took a few slow steps across the courtyard, letting the sound of his boots on stone echo softly in the now-awake castle. Each step reminded him of the hours he had spent still, of the long, patient vigil that had felt endless in the dark. The lessons of the night were no longer abstract. They had settled into his bones, teaching him calm, endurance, and presence. Above him, a bird called clearly from the tower roof, its song bright and uncontented. Ulrich tilted his head and smiled faintly, recognizing the harmony between the life outside and the silent lessons within the castle walls. The murmurings of the night, once so mysterious and unsettling, had transformed into a quiet understanding, a memory that reminded him of the patience required to face any long watch. The gate behind him seemed to breathe in the morning light, the iron and wood warmed and softened by the sun. Ulrich ran his hand lightly along its edge, feeling the smooth grooves worn by countless hands before him. It had been more than a barrier. It had been a companion, a teacher, a witness to the night he had endured. He let his gaze wander beyond the courtyard, across the moat and the fields, and for a moment felt the bridge between night and day. The transition was not sudden or jarring. It was gradual, like water spreading over stone. Ulrich understood now that the night's trials were not obstacles, but invitations to grow, to pay attention, and to embrace stillness. With a deep, steady breath, he let the morning wash over him completely. The castle had awakened, the world beyond stirred to life, and Ulrich felt a calm readiness settle through him, carrying the memory of the night like a gentle, unending pulse. The courtyard basked in full morning light now, and the last lingering shadows of night retreated into hidden corners. Ulrich stood near the gate, feeling the sun's warmth brush his cheeks and the back of his neck. The chill that had once pressed through his cloak and boots had vanished, replaced by a comforting heat that seeped into his muscles and bones. The castle stirred around him. From the inner halls came the shuffle of feet, the faint clatter of utensils, and low, cheerful greetings exchanged between servants and guards. Even the air seemed alive, carrying scents of bread baking, fresh herbs, and warm stone. Ulrich inhaled slowly, letting each detail sink in, realizing how fully the world had shifted from the quiet, tense stillness of night to this gentle, purposeful activity. He ran a hand along the gate, feeling the texture of the oak and iron, appreciating the solidity beneath his fingers. The gate had been his companion through the long hours, holding its place firmly while he learned patience and endurance. Now it seemed almost to acknowledge him, warm in the sun and silent in its approval. Birdsong had grown louder, clearer, more insistent, as if marking the complete passage of night into day. A gentle breeze rustled the banners above the towers, carrying their movement across the courtyard. Ulrich's eyes followed the play of light and shadow on the stones, noticing the way the sun illuminated every detail, the grooves worn by countless feet, the tiny chips and cracks in the iron, the moss thriving in the spaces between stones. Each one told a story of time, endurance, and quiet watchfulness. For the first time since night fell, Ulrich allowed himself to relax completely, shifting his weight and letting his shoulders drop. He had endured the long vigil, learned its lessons, and been present through hours that many would have feared. The sun, the castle, the courtyard, they all seemed to acknowledge him silently, offering warmth, light, and calm in return. He breathed in one slow, deep breath, feeling the air fill his lungs and spread through him. The night was gone. Its murmurs and whispers had faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of life and light. Ulrich's watch was over, and he stood ready to carry the lessons of the night forward into the day. The morning light poured fully into the courtyard now, soft and golden, casting every detail into sharp relief. Ulrich's cloak shifted lightly with the breeze, and he felt the gentle warmth of the sun seep into his skin. The chill of the night had vanished completely, leaving only a quiet, lingering energy in its place, a subtle reminder of what he had endured. He walked slowly along the stones, his boots making soft, deliberate sounds against the worn surfaces. Every detail seemed alive in the morning light, the grooves etched into the flagstones, the faint moss in the cracks, the iron bands of the gate glowing faintly where the sun touched them. Each element of the courtyard carried the memory of centuries of watchfulness, patience, and resilience, and Ulrich felt a deep connection to it all. From the inner halls came the low hum of activity, servants preparing food, guards walking briskly along the corridors, and the distant clang of a bell marking the morning hour. The sounds were calm, measured, and somehow celebratory, a gentle acknowledgement that the night had passed and a new day had begun. Ulrich paused by the gate, resting a hand on the iron once more. It had been his companion, his teacher, his silent guide through hours that seemed endless at first. Now, in the quiet triumph of morning, it stood firm and still, proud and unyielding. He felt gratitude, not only for the gate, but for the night itself, which had tested him, and left him stronger, calmer, and more aware. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the warmth and light fill him completely. The murmurs of the night were gone. The whispers of stone and shadow had faded into memory. In their place was the steady, comforting rhythm of life resuming. The wind in the towers, the soft calls of birds, the distant laughter of those beginning their day. Ulrich opened his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling a gentle sense of pride and serenity. The night had been long and challenging, but he had endured. The gate had held, the castle had watched, and he had learned the quiet power of patience, presence, and resilience. The day was his now, unfolding slowly, softly, and completely. The castle's rhythms continued to unfold gently around him. Ulrich could hear the distant scrape of broom against stone, and the soft murmur of voices as servants began their day. The scent of warm bread drifted from the kitchens, mingling with the earthy perfume of dew-drenched courtyards. Each subtle detail of morning felt heightened after the long hours of stillness during the night. He walked slowly along the edge of the courtyard, noticing the soft glimmer of sunlight on the iron hinges of the gate and the gentle way the wind moved the banners above. Every step felt deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if the simple act of moving in harmony with the castle's awakening was a continuation of his vigil rather than a break from it. A faint bird call echoed from the trees beyond the moat, and Ulrich paused to listen. Its song was clear, bright, and patient, perfectly attuned to the gradual rise of day. For the first time, he realized that the night's murmurs, which had once unsettled him, had been a form of guidance. They had taught him to notice, to wait, and to endure without expectation of reward. Now, in the clarity of morning, those lessons settled softly into his awareness. He approached the gate once more, running a hand along its iron bands. The metal was warm under his fingers, and the oak beneath it carried the faint memory of all the hands that had pressed against it before him. Ulrich felt a quiet sense of communion with the countless guardians who had stood at this threshold, watching and waiting through nights just like the one he had endured. The courtyard was alive now in ways he had not fully appreciated until this moment. Distant footsteps, the soft laughter of someone greeting a companion, the faint clinking of utensils from the kitchen. Ulrich inhaled slowly, letting the smells, sounds, and textures fill him completely. The night had tested him, the castle had guided him, and now the morning affirmed that he had endured with calm, attention, and patience. He exhaled, a long, steady breath, feeling the full warmth of the sun and the pulse of life around him. The world was awake, and so was he, carrying the quiet triumph of his vigil into the day that had begun. The castle thrummed with life now, though nothing was hurried or loud. Ulrich walked along the courtyard, taking slow, measured steps that allowed him to notice the textures beneath his boots, the worn grooves of centuries, the tiny cracks softened by moss, and the faint ridges of flagstones polished smooth by endless passage. Each one told a story of time, endurance, and quiet vigilance, echoing the lessons of the night. From the inner halls came a low, steady hum of activity, the scrape of brooms against stone, the soft clatter of trays, the muffled chatter of servants exchanging greetings. Ulrich listened carefully, letting the rhythm of the castle seep into him. The sounds were not intrusive. They were steady and grounding, affirming the continuity of life that had paused for him to learn the night's lessons. He paused by the gate, letting his hand rest on the cool iron. Its surface had warmed slightly in the morning light, and he could feel the faint vibration of energy running through it, as if the gate itself remembered his watch. It had held firm, steady, and unwavering. It had taught him patience, endurance, and presence, and now it seemed to hum in quiet acknowledgement of a vigil completed. The wind drifted gently through the courtyard, carrying the scent of dew, distant flowers, and the soft smoke of early fires. Ulrich inhaled deeply, feeling the freshness of morning fill his lungs. The long night of shadows and whispers had left him grounded, calm, and aware. And now every sensation, the warmth of the sun, the cool touch of stone, the hum of life, felt vivid and alive. Birds fluttered across the sky, and the banners above the towers swayed in the morning breeze. Ulrich's eyes traced their movements, slow and deliberate, and he felt a quiet harmony settle through him. The night had been challenging, the darkness had tested him, but now the castle's pulse and the world's slow awakening reassured him. He had endured, he had learned, and the day, gentle and promising, stretched before him like a quiet gift. The castle's courtyard settled into a steady rhythm, each sound distinct, yet part of a larger pattern. Ulrich moved slowly among the stones, feeling their warmth under his boots and tracing his fingers along the edges of the gate. The iron bands reflected the sun, gleaming softly, and he could almost sense the weight of history embedded within them. Countless hands, countless nights, countless watchers who had come before him. From the inner halls came the subtle hum of activity, a distant bell marking the hour, the scrape of wooden brushes, soft calls exchanged between servants. The sounds blended into a soothing cadence, almost musical in their repetition. Ulrich inhaled deeply, letting the harmony of movement, light, and sound fill his chest. Every detail reminded him of the night he had kept, the stillness, the patience, the careful attention to every sensation. The gate felt solid beneath his palm, and he rested against it for a moment, feeling the warmth of the morning sun seep through the iron and into his hand. Its steadfast presence had been his anchor through the hours of darkness, and now, in the calm of day, it seemed almost alive with quiet approval. Ulrich turned his gaze upward to the towers, noticing the fluttering banners swaying in the gentle breeze. The courtyard smelled faintly of earth, dew, and freshly baked bread from the kitchens. Birds called from the trees beyond the moat, their songs bright and reassuring. Each sound, each scent, each movement seemed to affirm his endurance and the lessons learned in the night. Vigilance, patience, and calm awareness. He moved slowly, savoring each step, each breath, and each gentle whisper of life around him. The world was awake, steady, and complete. The night's shadows had passed, leaving a quiet clarity behind, and Ulrich felt it settle in his chest. He had endured the vigil, he had listened, and now, bathed in morning light, he was part of the castle's living rhythm, carrying the quiet triumph of his watch into the unfolding day. The courtyard basked fully in sunlight now, and the castle's morning rhythms had grown steady and predictable. Ulrich moved deliberately along the stones, noticing every texture beneath his boots, the subtle dips and grooves worn smooth by countless footsteps, the faint moss nestled in crevices, the iron bands of the gate warmed by the sun. Each detail felt vivid, alive, and infused with the quiet weight of history. The sounds of the castle's awakening reached him softly, the scrape of brooms, the low murmur of voices, the distant clang of a bell marking the next hour. It was a gentle, unhurried symphony, a reminder that life had returned after the long, patient night. Ulrich allowed himself to breathe it all in, savoring the rhythm and noticing the calm endurance that connected the day to the night he had kept. He paused once more at the gate, resting a hand on the iron and oak. The surface was warm under his fingers, reassuring, a steadfast companion that had guided him silently through the hours of darkness. He could almost feel the echoes of the squires and guards who had stood here before him, their patience and resolve flowing quietly into his own sense of presence. Above the courtyard, banners swayed in the gentle morning breeze, casting faint shadows that danced across the stones. Birds flitted across the sky, calling to one another, while the soft scent of dew, earth, and the faint smoke of cooking fires drifted through the air. Every element of the morning reminded him of the lessons the night had imparted: stillness, awareness, and the strength to endure without expectation. Ulrich inhaled deeply, letting the warmth and life of morning fill his lungs. The night had been long, challenging, and filled with mystery, but it had passed. Now, standing in sunlight, he felt a quiet triumph, a gentle certainty that he had been part of something larger than himself. The day awaited, and he was ready to move forward, carrying the calm endurance of his vigil into the rhythm of life once more. The sunlight had climbed higher, spilling fully into the courtyard, illuminating every detail with gentle clarity. Ulrich stood near the gate, letting the warmth soak into his cloak and his skin. The iron bands glimmered softly, and the oak beneath his hand felt steady and familiar. It was more than just a gate, it was a companion, a witness to the long, quiet hours he had endured, and a silent teacher of patience and presence. The castle had fully awakened. From the inner halls came the low murmur of conversation and the soft clatter of footsteps. Somewhere, a bell rang gently, announcing the hour. Ulrich walked slowly along the stones, savoring their texture, noticing every worn groove, every patch of moss, every subtle mark left by time. The courtyard, which had seemed vast and intimidating in the darkness, now felt intimate and alive, rich with history and purpose. Birdsong floated from the trees outside the moat, clear and bright. The wind drifted through the towers, carrying with it the scent of earth, dew, and the faint aroma of baking bread. Ulrich inhaled slowly, letting the air fill him completely. Each sound, each movement, each subtle change of light reminded him of the vigil he had kept. The night had tested him, but it had also taught him to observe, to endure, and to remain present. He rested his hand lightly on the gate once more, feeling its solidity beneath his palm. The morning light seemed to affirm his watch, highlighting the endurance not only of the castle but of himself. He had faced the long hours, the murmurs, the whispers of stone and shadow, and he had remained. The gate, the courtyard, and the castle all seemed to acknowledge his quiet triumph. Ulrich closed his eyes briefly, breathing in the warmth and life of the morning. He opened them again to see the full courtyard bathed in light, peaceful and calm. The night had passed, but its lessons lingered, quiet and enduring, like the memory of a gentle song. Today, he would carry them with him, steady and sure. Ulrich lingered in the courtyard, letting the warmth of the morning sun settle into his shoulders and chest. The air was calm and fragrant, carrying the subtle sense of dew earth, and the faint smoke of hearth fires from the kitchens. Each inhale seemed to ground him further, reminding him that he had endured the long, silent night, and now stood fully awake in its aftermath. He moved slowly to a low stone wall near the edge of the courtyard, resting his arms upon it and gazing outward toward the moat and the fields beyond. The view, so familiar in daylight, now appeared alive with subtle textures: the glint of sunlight on water, the gentle sway of trees in the breeze, the distant movement of animals stirring in the morning. The world felt quiet but full of possibility, a sharp contrast to the still hushed night he had kept. The gate behind him gleamed faintly, its iron and oak warmed by the rising sun. Ulrich's hand brushed along the smooth metal, tracing the worn patterns etched by countless hands before his. He thought of those who had stood here before him, and a quiet sense of connection settled into his chest. The vigil was more than a test, it was a communion, a shared experience with all who had guarded this threshold through time. From the towers above, Banners swayed lazily in the soft breeze. Birds called from the treetops, their songs confident and bright. Ulrich allowed his gaze to drift across the courtyard, noticing the details he had not fully appreciated in the dimness of night. The grooves in the stones, the faint moss between bricks, the subtle imperfections that spoke of centuries of endurance. Each one was a quiet lesson in patience and observation. He exhaled slowly, feeling a calm certainty spread through him. The night had been long, but it had passed. The castle had watched him, guided him, and now seemed to rest with him, fully alive in morning light. Ulrich understood, in a way he had not before, that this watch was never about fear or strength alone, but about presence, endurance, and quiet attention to the world. The courtyard was now fully bathed in morning light, each stone glowing softly with warmth. Ulrich's cloak shifted with the gentle breeze, brushing against his arms as he walked slowly along the edge of the gate. The air carried the faint scent of earth, dew, and the subtle smoke of distant fires, each inhalation grounding him further in the calm of day. He paused to run a hand along the gate, feeling the warmth of the sun on the iron and the smooth grain of the oak. The gate had been his steadfast companion through the long night, unwavering and patient. It seemed almost alive in the morning light, a quiet testament to endurance and the lessons learned during the hours of stillness. The castle hummed softly with life. From the inner halls came the gentle scrape of brooms, the faint clatter of trays, and the muted voices of servants greeting one another. Ulrich listened to the rhythm, noticing how the sounds interwove to form a quiet, steady pulse that connected him to the world he had watched over all night. Every detail, the shimmer of sunlight on moss, the soft sway of banners above, the glint of metal hinges felt vivid and alive. Birds sang clearly from the trees beyond the moat, their melodies bright and steady. Ulrich tilted his head, letting the music of morning flow over him, carrying the sense of calm and triumph that had settled into his chest. The night's murmurs, once mysterious and unsettling, had been replaced by the gentle affirmation of the world's continuity. He stood for a long moment, hand resting on the gate, breathing in the warmth and life of the morning. The night had been a test, a slow and patient teacher, and now the sunlight affirmed his endurance. Ulrich smiled softly, feeling a quiet pride and serenity. He had kept the vigil, he had listened, and he had remained present. And now, as the castle fully awakened around him, he carried the lessons of the night forward into the day. The castle's courtyard shimmered with morning warmth, every stone and iron hinge glowing softly in the sun's gentle light. Ulrich walked slowly, deliberately, noticing the fine details that had escaped him in the darkness, the delicate moss growing in tiny crevices, the smooth wear on the flagstones from countless footsteps, the faint scratches on the iron bands of the gate that told stories of past watchers. Each observation carried the quiet satisfaction of someone who had truly endured the night. From the inner halls, the castle stirred, the soft scrape of wooden brushes on stone, the low hum of voices, and the occasional clatter of utensils created a steady, comforting rhythm. Ulrich let the sounds wash over him, realizing that the world beyond the gate had always been alive, patiently waiting for those who watched to awaken with it. He felt a connection, a sense of belonging to the pulse of the castle and its daily routines. The breeze drifted through the courtyard, carrying with it the sense of dew, fresh earth, and the distant fires of the kitchens. Birds called from the trees outside the moat, their melodies clear and bright, weaving with the subtle sounds of human activity to form a delicate symphony of morning life. Ulrich paused, breathing it all in, feeling the calm and steady reassurance of the world's continuity after the long shadowed hours of night. He returned to the gate, resting a hand on the iron bands, feeling the solid warmth left by the morning sun. The gate had been his anchor through the night, steadfast and silent, and now it seemed to offer a quiet acknowledgement of his endurance. The experience had not been easy there, had been tension, fatigue, and uncertainty, but the lessons it had imparted now glowed as clearly as the stones beneath his boots. Ulrich exhaled slowly, savoring the stillness, the warmth, and the rhythm of life around him. The night had passed, and its teachings were now a part of him. He had learned the quiet power of attention, the resilience of patience, and the calm strength that comes from enduring in silence. The castle, the gate, and the morning light all bore witness to this truth. The morning sun continued to climb, bathing the courtyard in a warm, golden light that softened every stone and iron hinge. Ulrich stood still for a moment, letting the brightness wash over him, feeling it seep into his shoulders, his arms, and the soles of his boots. The chill of the night had completely disappeared, replaced by a calm, grounding warmth that made each movement feel effortless and deliberate. He walked slowly along the edge of the courtyard, noticing the subtle details that had been hidden in darkness, the tiny flecks of lichen on the stone, the faint scratches on the iron gate, and the delicate pattern of sunlight dancing across mossy grooves. Every texture, every mark, told a story of endurance, patience, and centuries of quiet vigilance. Ulrich's fingers traced lightly over the iron bands, feeling their solidity and warmth, acknowledging the silent companion that had stood with him all night. The castle was alive with gentle activity. Soft footsteps echoed from corridors. The scrape of brooms brushed across stone floors, and faint voices carried as people began their daily tasks. Beyond the moat, birds called brightly from the treetops, their songs weaving with the castle's sounds into a peaceful, reassuring rhythm. Ulrich absorbed it all, sensing the harmony between the stillness he had maintained and the life that now surrounded him. He paused at the gate once more, leaning lightly against it. The night's whispers, murmurs, and quiet lessons had faded into memory, leaving him with a deep understanding of vigilance, patience, and presence. He could feel the castle acknowledging his endurance, each stone and beam reflecting the effort, calm, and quiet courage he had brought to his watch. Ulrich exhaled slowly, letting the morning fill him completely. The long night had ended, and a gentle triumph settled in his chest. He had learned the subtle power of attention, the quiet strength of endurance, and the enduring calm that comes from being fully present. The sun warmed him, the castle moved around him, and the day stretched ahead like a soft, unhurried promise. The courtyard had settled fully into the rhythm of morning. Sunlight warmed the stones, casting soft golden hues across the moss and worn grooves, and Ulrich felt it seep into his skin and muscles, easing the stiffness of his vigil. The world beyond the gate was awake, yet it moved with a gentle, measured pace, allowing him to transition from watchfulness to active participation without rush. He took slow steps toward the center of the courtyard, noticing the fine details that had seemed distant in the darkness, the subtle cracks in the stone, the intricate patterns of iron on the gate, the way sunlight caught the edges of carved figures on the towers. Each one seemed alive now, telling quiet stories of centuries of guardianship, patience, and resilience. From the castle's inner halls came the soft sounds of preparation, a tray set on a table, a broom sweeping across stone, a faint laugh exchanged between servants. Ulrich inhaled deeply, savoring the aromas of fresh bread, warmed stone, and early morning dew. The castle had shifted from the stillness of night to the gentle rhythm of day, and he felt himself moving in harmony with it. He paused near the gate, resting a hand on the iron bands. They had been his anchor, his teacher, and his silent companion through the night. and now they seemed to hum with quiet approval in the morning warmth. The lessons of the vigil, patience, presence, calm, endurance, were embedded within him, flowing through each movement, each breath. Ulrich stepped back slightly, surveying the courtyard. The sun painted long, soft shadows across the stones, and the castle moved around him in gentle, deliberate motions. Today, he understood, would be different. The world had resumed its rhythm, and he would carry the night's quiet triumph into the day's unfolding tasks. The gate remained steadfast behind him, a reminder of the night endured and the lessons learned, standing as steady as the calm he now carried within himself. The courtyard pulsed softly with the morning's rhythm, every stone and iron hinge warmed by the gentle sun. Ulrich moved deliberately among them, his boots pressing against surfaces worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Each step carried him further into the day, yet he remained grounded in the calm and patience that had carried him through the long night. From the inner halls came the steady murmur of activity, the soft scrape of brooms, the shuffle of boots across stone, and muted conversations drifting from corridors. Ulrich listened carefully, noticing the ebb and flow of movement, the rise and fall of sounds that marked the castle's awakening. In the night, these echoes would have been distant and faint, perhaps even eerie, but now they felt like the heartbeat of the world itself, steady, reassuring, and full of life. He paused near the gate, placing a hand once more on the warm iron. The surface carried the faint heat of the sun, solid and comforting beneath his palm. The gate had been more than a barrier in the darkness. It had been a companion, teaching him patience, vigilance, and quiet endurance. Now, in the soft light of morning, it seemed to hum with silent approval, a witness to his night-long vigilance. Birds called from the trees beyond the moat, their melodies weaving through the castle's gentle hum. Ulrich breathed in slowly, savoring the mingling scents of dew, earth, and hearth fires. The courtyard, once silent and mysterious, now resonated with life, yet remained peaceful. A balance between movement and stillness, a harmony that mirrored the lessons he had absorbed through the night. He took a slow, measured step back from the gate, letting his eyes wander across the courtyard. The stones glimmered, the banners fluttered lightly, and the sun cast golden highlights across every surface. Ulrich felt the deep satisfaction of endurance, the quiet triumph of having remained, having watched, and having learned. The castle breathed around him, steady and enduring, and he felt himself breathing in sync, carrying the calm of night into the waking rhythm of day. Sunlight now filled the courtyard completely, scattering gold across the worn stones and highlighting the subtle textures of the walls and gate. Ulrich felt the warmth brush his shoulders and face, and it seeped into his bones, easing the lingering stiffness from the long night. Each movement felt measured, deliberate, as if the day itself was encouraging him to walk slowly, to notice every detail, and to carry the night's lessons gently forward. From the castle's inner halls came a chorus of soft sounds, the scrape of brooms against stone, the shuffle of boots along the corridors, the distant clink of utensils and trays. Ulrich paused for a moment, closing his eyes to absorb it fully. The sounds were harmonious, blending into a rhythm that was soothing and grounding. The night's tension had dissolved completely, replaced by the gentle pulse of daily life. He returned to the gate, placing a hand on the iron bands. The warmth radiating from the sun-warmed metal was comforting, familiar. The gate had been his steadfast companion through the night, a silent teacher and witness to his vigil. Now it seemed to acknowledge him, as though it recognized the calm endurance he had brought to the darkness. Birds called brightly from the trees beyond the moat, their melodies weaving through the castle's subtle noises. The breeze carried the scent of dew-soaked earth, fresh grass, and the faint aroma of fires from the kitchens. Ulrich inhaled deeply, letting each sensation settle into him, a reminder that he had emerged from the night with presence and attention fully intact. He leaned lightly against the gate, feeling its solidity beneath his palm, and let a slow, contented sigh escape him. The night had tested him, the darkness had challenged him, yet he had endured. The day had arrived gently, affirming his strength, patience, and calm awareness. Ulrich smiled softly, carrying the quiet triumph of his vigil as he prepared to meet the waking world fully awake and steady. The courtyard was bathed in full daylight now, every stone and surface revealing its subtle details under the sun's warm glow. Ulrich's boots made soft, steady sounds as he walked slowly along the worn stones, each step a reminder of the night he had endured. The chill of the darkness was gone, replaced by a comforting warmth that seemed to spread from the sun into his muscles, his bones, and even his spirit. The castle stirred softly around him. From the inner halls, the shuffle of feet and the low murmur of voices filled the air with a gentle rhythm. Somewhere, a bell chimed softly, marking the progress of the morning. Ulrich paused, closing his eyes for a moment, and let these subtle sounds settle into him, feeling a profound sense of connection to the pulse of life that had quietly resumed around the castle walls. He returned his hand to the gate, feeling the iron and oak under his fingers. The gate had been his constant companion through the long night, steadfast and unyielding. Now, in the bright morning light, it seemed almost alive, its warmth and solidity affirming the endurance and calm he had maintained. Ulrich traced the grooves and imperfections etched by centuries of use, sensing the shared history of all who had stood here before him. Birdsong floated clearly from the trees beyond the moat, intertwining with the soft noises of the waking castle. The air was rich with the scent of dew, earth, and distant hearth fires. Ulrich inhaled slowly, letting each detail anchor him fully in the present. The night's shadows had receded completely, leaving only the lessons they had imparted: patience, attentiveness, and the quiet strength of endurance. He stepped back from the gate, letting the warmth and life of morning envelop him. The vigil had ended, but its quiet triumph lingered, steady and enduring. Ulrich felt a calm certainty. He had watched, he had endured, and now, as the castle breathed in sunlight, he carried the night's lessons with him into the rhythm of day. The morning unfolded fully now, the sun climbing higher to illuminate every corner of the courtyard. Ulrich moved slowly, each step deliberate, feeling the texture of the stones beneath his boots, the subtle grooves and worn edges that bore centuries of footsteps. The warmth of the sun spread through him, easing the lingering stiffness from the long night of vigilance. The castle hummed quietly with life. From distant corridors came the soft scrape of brooms and the low, rhythmic shuffle of boots. Voices calm and measured drifted along the stone halls, blending with the distant clink of utensils and the faint bell marking the hour. Ulrich paused, closing his eyes briefly to absorb the gentle symphony of the morning. Each sound, subtle yet deliberate, reminded him of the continuity of life and the quiet strength of enduring through stillness. He returned his hand to the gate, feeling the smooth warmth of the iron under his palm. Its steadfast presence had been his anchor through the night, guiding him silently, teaching patience and attentiveness. Now, in the morning light, the gate seemed to hum with approval, a quiet affirmation of his endurance and the calm vigilance he had maintained. Birds sang brightly from the trees beyond the moat, their melodies mingling with the castle's rhythms to create a peaceful harmony. The air was filled with the scent of dew, earth, and distant hearth fires, grounding him further in the present. Ulrich inhaled deeply, letting the morning envelop him fully. The night had passed, leaving only lessons, endurance, and a gentle triumph that now resided quietly in his chest. He stood for a long moment, feeling the warmth of the sun, the solidity of the gate, and the subtle pulse of life around him. The night's challenges had transformed into a calm, enduring awareness. Ulrich exhaled slowly, a soft smile touching his lips, carrying the night's quiet strength into the awakening world. The courtyard shimmered under the brightening sun, each stone glowing softly, every iron hinge gleaming with warmth. Ulrich walked slowly, deliberately, savoring the textures beneath his boots, the worn grooves, the tiny cracks filled with moss, the edges of stone softened by centuries of passage. Every detail reminded him of the night he had endured, the vigil he had kept, and the lessons the castle had imparted in silence. From the inner halls came the gentle rhythms of the waking castle, the soft scrape of brooms, the muted clatter of trays, and the low hum of voices greeting one another. These sounds blended seamlessly with the bird calls drifting from beyond the moat, creating a gentle symphony that filled the courtyard. Ulrich listened carefully, letting the cadence of life settle into him. The night's tension had been replaced by calm, steady reassurance. He rested a hand on the gate, feeling its warmth and solidity beneath his palm. The iron and oak had been his steadfast companions through the long hours of darkness, unyielding and patient. Now, in the gentle light of morning, the gate seemed to acknowledge his endurance, silently affirming the quiet triumph he had earned. Ulrich took a slow, deep breath, letting the sense of dew, earth, and distant fires fill his lungs. He felt connected to the castle, to the world around him, and to the long line of watchers who had stood at this gate before him. The night had tested him, but he had faced it fully, patiently, and with presence. As he exhaled, a calm satisfaction spread through him. The shadows of night had faded, leaving only the enduring lessons of vigilance, patience, and quiet strength. The castle breathed gently around him, alive in the warmth and rhythm of morning, and Ulrich carried the sense of accomplishment and serenity from his vigil into the soft, unfolding day. The sun now shone fully upon the courtyard, casting soft golden light across the stones and warming the iron and oak of the gate. Ulrich walked slowly, deliberately, feeling the textures beneath his boots, the worn grooves, the slight dips, and the subtle ridges shaped by centuries of passage. Each step reminded him of the long hours of vigil he had endured, and of the calm patience he had cultivated through the night. From the castle's inner halls came the gentle sounds of morning, the faint shuffle of boots along stone corridors, the scrape of brooms brushing against floors, and low, measured voices carrying distant greetings. Ulrich allowed these sounds to settle into him, feeling the rhythm of life around the castle merge with the steady beat of his own presence. The night's tension had completely faded, replaced by a soft, reassuring harmony. He rested a hand lightly on the gate, feeling the sun-warmed metal and wood beneath his palm. The gate had been his constant companion through the night, unyielding and patient, and now it seemed almost alive, offering silent acknowledgement of his endurance. The lessons of stillness, vigilance, and quiet attentiveness had become part of him, like the warmth of sunlight absorbed into stone. Birds called from the trees beyond the moat, their melodies bright and confident, blending with the castle's soft hum of activity. The air was rich with dew earth, and the faint aroma of early fires in the kitchens. Ulrich inhaled deeply, letting the calm of morning fill him completely. He stepped back, taking in the courtyard as a whole. Every detail, the stones, the gate, the banners swaying gently above, the subtle play of light and shadow seemed infused with a quiet life. The night had been long and testing, but he had endured, and now, in the gentle embrace of day, he carried its lessons with him, steady, calm, and fully present. The courtyard basked in the full glow of morning, the sun illuminating every surface with a gentle, golden light. Ulrich moved slowly, each step measured, feeling the textures of stone beneath his boots, the worn grooves, the faint patches of moss, and the smooth edges softened by countless footsteps over time. Every detail spoke quietly of endurance, patience, and vigilance, reminding him of the long hours he had kept watch. From the castle's halls came the subtle stirrings of daily life, the faint clatter of utensils, the scrape of a broom across stone, and muted voices greeting one another. Ulrich paused, allowing these sounds to fill him. They were calm, rhythmic, and reassuring, a gentle affirmation that life had resumed after the quiet intensity of night. The castle seemed to breathe with him, steady and deliberate. He returned his hand to the gate, feeling its warm iron and oak beneath his fingers. It had been his steadfast companion through the night, unyielding and patient, guiding him silently. Now, in the full morning light, it seemed almost to hum with approval, acknowledging the calm endurance he had maintained. Ulrich traced the worn grooves and scratches on the metal, sensing the history embedded there, a lineage of watchers who had stood at this threshold before him. Birdsong floated from the trees beyond the moat, clear and bright, mingling with the soft hum of the castle's activity. The air was fragrant with dew, earth, and faint smoke from the hearths, grounding him further in the present. Each detailed the sights, sounds, and scents affirmed the lessons the night had imparted: patience, presence, and quiet strength. Ulrich exhaled slowly, allowing the warmth, life, and steady rhythm of morning to settle fully within him. The night had passed, leaving behind a gentle triumph and deep serenity. The castle, the gate, and the courtyard all seemed to acknowledge his endurance, and he felt a calm certainty that he carried the night's lessons with him into the unfolding day. The courtyard glowed fully under the morning sun, each stone and iron hinge illuminated with soft golden light. Ulrich moved slowly, deliberately, savoring the feel of the warm stones beneath his boots and the gentle warmth of the sun on his shoulders. The chill of the night had vanished completely, replaced by a comforting heat that spread through his body, easing the lingering tension of his vigil. From within the castle came the gentle pulse of activity, the scrape of brooms along stone floors, the shuffle of feet, and the low murmur of voices exchanging greetings. Ulrich paused, allowing these soft sounds to settle into him. The rhythm of life was steady and reassuring, a calm companion to the quiet endurance he had cultivated through the night. He rested his hand on the gate, feeling the smooth warmth of the iron and oak beneath his palm. The gate had been his steadfast companion through the darkness, holding firm and unyielding. Now, in the morning light, it seemed to radiate a quiet acknowledgement of his patience and vigilance, a subtle praise for enduring the long, shadowed hours. Birds called from the trees beyond the moat, their songs bright and lively, weaving with the hum of the castle into a serene morning symphony. The air carried the scent of dew-soaked earth, fresh grass, and distant hearth fires. Ulrich inhaled deeply, letting the gentle aromas and melodies settle fully into him, grounding him in the present and reminding him of the quiet lessons the night had imparted. He stepped back, taking a slow, deliberate gaze over the courtyard. Every detail, the worn stones, the moss-filled crevices, the swaying banners, the gate's steadfast presence spoke of endurance, continuity, and quiet strength. The night had tested him, but he had endured. Now, as the day unfolded gently around him, he carried with him the calm certainty and subtle triumph that had grown from the long hours of vigilance. The courtyard basked in the soft, steady glow of late morning, the sun casting golden warmth across every stone and banner. Ulrich walked slowly, each step deliberate, noticing the worn grooves beneath his boots, the faint moss in the cracks, and the subtle textures of the iron and oak gate. Each detail reminded him of the night he had endured, the quiet patience, the stillness, the vigilance that had stretched endlessly until dawn. From the inner halls, the gentle pulse of activity continued. Distant footsteps echoed across stone floors, the scrape of brooms, the quiet exchange of voices. Ulrich allowed the sounds to flow over him, feeling the rhythm of the castle settle into his chest. The night's tension had fully dissolved, replaced by a steady, reassuring cadence that spoke of life resuming naturally and calmly. He approached the gate, placing his hand once more on its warm, smooth surface. It had been his silent companion through the darkness, steadfast and enduring. Now, in the full brightness of morning, it seemed to hum with quiet approval, acknowledging the strength, patience, and presence he had brought to the long vigil. The scratches and grooves in the iron and oak told countless stories of past watchers, connecting him to the lineage of those who had come before. Birdsong floated clearly from the trees beyond the moat, bright and confident. The air was rich with the mingling scents of dew earth and the faint smoke of hearth fires. Ulrich inhaled slowly, letting the freshness of morning fill him completely. The night's lessons endurance, quiet attention, and calm strength had become part of him, steady and enduring like the gate itself. He exhaled, a long, deliberate breath, feeling the warmth, the light, and the rhythm of life settle fully within him. The night had ended, leaving only the soft triumph of completion. Ulrich stood quietly in the sun, carrying the calm certainty of his vigil into the day that now stretched gently and patiently before him. The courtyard glowed under the steady morning sun, its light soft and warm, bringing out the subtle colors in every stone and iron hinge. Ulrich moved slowly across the worn flagstones, feeling the texture of centuries beneath his boots, the gentle dips, grooves, and imperfections that spoke of countless footsteps and countless days. Every detail seemed alive, a quiet testament to endurance, patience, and vigilance. From the castle's inner halls came a gentle symphony of activity, the soft scrape of brooms, the distant clatter of utensils, and low, steady voices. Ulrich paused, closing his eyes briefly to let the sounds settle fully into him. Each noise, subtle and calm, reminded him of the castle's steady heartbeat, the rhythm of life that had quietly persisted through the night and now unfolded gently into day. He returned to the gate, resting a hand on the warm iron. It had been his companion through the darkness, steadfast and patient, guiding him silently through hours of stillness. Now, bathed in sunlight, it seemed to radiate quiet acknowledgement, a soft affirmation of his vigilance and endurance. Ulrich traced the worn grooves and scratches in the iron and oak, feeling a connection to all the watchers who had come before him. Birdsong drifted from the trees beyond the moat, blending with the muted activity of the castle into a serene morning melody. The air smelled faintly of dew earth and the soft smoke of distant fires. Ulrich inhaled slowly, letting each scent and sound fill him completely, grounding him in the present and reminding him of the quiet lessons the night had imparted. He stood for a long moment, taking in the courtyard and the gate that had been both his challenge and his companion. The night had passed, leaving behind calm, quiet triumph, and the gentle warmth of sunlight seemed to bless him, affirming the endurance, patience, and presence he had maintained. The courtyard was fully alive with morning light, golden and warm, casting gentle shadows across the worn flagstones. Ulrich moved slowly, each step measured, feeling the textures beneath his boots, the dips, grooves, and moss that spoke of centuries of passage. Every detail seemed heightened after the night he had kept, each one a quiet reminder of the patience, vigilance, and endurance that had carried him through hours of darkness. From within the castle came the subtle hum of daily life, the faint scrape of brooms across stone floors, the shuffle of boots, and low, calm voices exchanged in quiet greetings. Ulrich paused, listening carefully. The castle's rhythm was steady and reassuring, a gentle pulse that mirrored the calm he had cultivated during his night-long vigil. The tension of darkness had dissolved, replaced by the harmonious beat of life resuming around him. He returned to the gate, resting a hand on its warm iron bands. The gate had been his steadfast companion through the night, unyielding and patient, guiding him silently and teaching quiet endurance. Now, in the full light of morning, it seemed almost alive with approval, a subtle acknowledgement of his presence and perseverance. He traced the worn marks on the iron and oak, feeling a lineage of watchers embedded in the very wood and metal. Birds called brightly from the trees beyond the moat, their songs weaving with the castle's soft activity into a gentle, comforting symphony. The air was filled with the fragrance of dew, earth, and distant fires, grounding him further in the present moment. Ulrich inhaled deeply, letting the calm, steady rhythm of the day settle into him completely. He exhaled slowly, allowing the warmth, light, and steady pulse of life to fill him. The night had ended, leaving a quiet triumph, a serene sense of accomplishment, and the enduring lessons of patience, vigilance, and calm strength. The castle, the gate, and the courtyard all seemed to hum in quiet acknowledgement, and Ulrich carried that serenity gently forward into the unfolding day. The morning sun had risen fully, casting a gentle warmth over the courtyard. Every stone, every iron hinge, every worn groove glimmered softly under its golden light. Ulrich walked slowly, savoring each step on the cool yet sun-warmed flagstones, noticing the subtle textures that centuries of footsteps had left behind. The world felt vivid, alive, and calm, a perfect contrast to the long, tense hours of the night he had kept. From the inner halls came the gentle stir of life, the scrape of a broom, the muted clatter of trays, and the low hum of conversations exchanged between servants and guards. Ulrich allowed the rhythm to flow over him, feeling the steady pulse of the castle's daily life mirror the calm vigilance he had maintained throughout the night. The tension and uncertainty of darkness had melted away, leaving only a quiet, affirming harmony. He rested his hand on the gate once more, feeling the warmth of the sun-warmed iron and oak beneath his fingers. The gate had been steadfast through the long hours, a silent companion that had taught him patience and presence. Now, in the soft glow of morning, it seemed almost alive, quietly acknowledging the endurance and care he had brought to his vigil. Birdsong floated clearly from the trees beyond the moat, weaving with the castle's subtle sounds into a soothing morning melody. The air carried scents of dew, fresh earth, and faint smoke from distant hearths. Ulrich inhaled slowly, letting each element settle within him. The night's lessened stillness, attentiveness, and calm endurance were now fully a part of him, grounded in the reality of morning light. He stood quietly, allowing the courtyard, the castle, and the gate to surround him with their gentle harmony. The night had tested him, yet he had endured. Now, bathed in warmth, sound, and steady life, Ulrich carried the quiet triumph of his vigil into the soft unfolding of the day. The courtyard glowed under the mid-morning sun, every stone and iron hinge warmed by the steady light. Ulrich walked slowly, his boots making soft, deliberate sounds against the flagstones. He noticed the small details that daylight revealed, the faint moss between cracks, the worn edges of stones polished smooth by centuries of footsteps. and the subtle play of shadow along the walls and towers. Each element seemed alive, infused with the history of the castle and the endurance of those who had guarded it before him. From the inner halls drifted the gentle hum of life, footsteps echoing softly, brooms scraping against stone, and low voices exchanging greetings. Ulrich paused, closing his eyes briefly to let the rhythm settle into him. The pulse of daily life was steady, comforting, and harmonized with the calm vigilance he had maintained through the night. The lingering tension of darkness had vanished, replaced by the serene assurance of routine. He returned to the gate, resting a hand on the warm iron and oak. It had been his steadfast companion through the long hours, unyielding and patient. Now, in the bright morning light, it seemed to offer a quiet acknowledgment of his endurance. The worn grooves and scratches bore witness to the countless watchers who had stood here, silently passing on their lessons of patience and vigilance. Ulrich felt part of that lineage, a quiet bond linking him to the generations who had guarded this threshold. Birdsong from the trees beyond the moat mingled with the castle's gentle sounds, forming a soft, comforting symphony. The air carried scents of dew, earth, and distant fires, grounding him fully in the moment. Ulrich inhaled deeply, letting the calm settle through every part of him. The night had been long and testing, but its lessons, presence, endurance, and quiet strength had become his own. He exhaled slowly, feeling the warmth of the sun, the steady pulse of the castle, and the quiet triumph of having endured. The gate, the stones, and the courtyard seemed to affirm his watch, and Ulrich carried that serenity gently forward into the unfolding day. The sun now sat high enough to warm the entire courtyard, casting a soft glow over the worn stones and iron hinges. Ulrich moved slowly, savoring each step as his boots pressed against the textured flagstones, the grooves, the cracks softened by moss, the subtle imperfections shaped by centuries of passage. Each detail seemed alive under the morning light, whispering stories of patience, endurance, and quiet vigilance. From the inner halls came the gentle pulse of castle life, the scrape of brooms along stone floors, soft footsteps moving from room to room, and low murmurs of greetings exchanged between servants and guards. Ulrich allowed the sounds to flow over him, grounding him in the rhythm of the castle. The long night of tension and uncertainty had passed, replaced by the reassuring steadiness of day. He returned his hand to the gate, feeling the sun-warmed iron and oak beneath his palm. The gate had been his silent companion through the night, steady and unwavering, teaching him patience, attentiveness, and calm endurance. Now, bathed in the full light of morning, it seemed almost alive, quietly recognizing the strength and vigilance he had shown. Birdsong floated from the trees beyond the moat, weaving into the castle's subtle sounds to form a serene melody. The air was rich with the sense of dew, earth, and distant fires, filling him with a grounded sense of presence. Ulrich inhaled deeply, letting each detail of the morning settle into him, a reminder of the quiet triumph of endurance and awareness. He stepped back slightly, taking in the courtyard as a whole, the stones, the gate, the swaying banners, the warm sunlight. The night had tested him, yet he had endured, carrying its lessons into the day. The castle's rhythm enveloped him, steady and comforting, and Ulrich felt a calm certainty, a gentle pride, and a serene sense of completion that stretched fully into the morning. The courtyard basked in the gentle, steady warmth of late morning. Sunlight poured over every stone, highlighting the subtle textures and imperfections that centuries of footsteps had carved into the flagstones. Ulrich walked slowly, deliberately, letting his eyes trace the moss-filled cracks, the worn grooves, and the smooth edges of the gates, iron and oak. Each detail carried the quiet weight of history, a reminder of all those who had stood vigil before him. The castle's life moved softly around him. From the inner halls came the faint scrape of brooms, the shuffle of boots across stone floors, and low, measured voices exchanging greetings. Ulrich closed his eyes briefly, listening deeply. The gentle rhythm of life was a comforting counterpoint to the night's shadows, a steady beat that mirrored the calm he had nurtured through hours of watchfulness. He rested his hand lightly on the gate. Its warmth and solidity felt reassuring, a tangible reminder of the silent endurance that had guided him through the darkness. The gate seemed almost alive in the morning light, as though acknowledging his presence and the patience he had brought to his vigil. The subtle scratches and grooves in its surface whispered of countless watchers before him, their lessons flowing quietly into his awareness. Birdsong floated from the trees beyond the moat, weaving with the soft hum of castle life into a gentle, comforting melody. The air carried the faint sense of dew, earth, and distant hearth fires, grounding him further in the moment. Ulrich inhaled slowly, letting the warmth, sounds, and aromas fill him completely, and he exhaled with a quiet sense of satisfaction. The night had ended, leaving him with lessons, endurance, and a subtle triumph. Ulrich felt the calm strength of his vigilance settling into his chest, a gentle warmth that would accompany him through the unfolding day. He stood quietly, allowing the castle, the gate, and the courtyard to embrace him in their steady, enduring rhythm. The courtyard glowed softly under the high morning sun, each stone bathed in a gentle golden light. Ulrich moved slowly across the flagstones, feeling the warmth beneath his boots and the familiar textures of the worn grooves, moss, and smooth edges shaped by centuries of passage. The long night of vigilance had ended, and now each detail felt alive, quiet, and comforting. From the inner halls drifted the soft sounds of the castle awakening, the gentle scrape of brooms, the low murmur of voices, and distant footsteps along the stone corridors. Ulrich paused, letting the rhythm of life settle into him. The tension and uncertainty of night had given way to a calm, steady beat that spoke of continuity, patience, and quiet endurance. He placed a hand on the gate once more, feeling the sun-warmed iron and oak beneath his fingers. The gate had been his companion through the darkness, steadfast and patient, teaching him vigilance and attentiveness. Now it seemed almost to hum with approval, a quiet acknowledgement of the endurance he had shown. Each scratch and groove told a story of those who had watched before, a lineage that connected him to generations of guardians. Birdsong floated clearly from the trees beyond the moat, blending with the castle's subtle sounds into a soft, soothing melody. The air carried the sense of dew, fresh earth, and distant hearth fires. Ulrich inhaled slowly, letting the warmth, life, and steady rhythm of morning settle fully into him. He exhaled, feeling the calm, quiet triumph of his vigil flow through him. The night had tested him, yet he had endured. Now, in the comforting embrace of sunlight and the gentle pulse of castle life, Ulrich carried the lessons of patience, vigilance, and calm awareness into the unfolding day. The courtyard was fully bathed in late morning light, warm and steady, casting soft shadows across the worn stones and the iron and oak of the gate. Ulrich moved slowly, each step deliberate, noticing every detail, the grooves smoothed by centuries of footsteps, the faint moss nestled in crevices, and the subtle warmth of sun on stone and metal. Every texture, every surface, carried a story of endurance and quiet vigilance, reminding him of the night he had kept. From the inner halls, the gentle sounds of castle life continued, the soft scrape of brooms, muted conversations, and the low shuffle of boots on stone. Ulrich paused, closing his eyes to absorb the rhythm. The pulse of daily life felt reassuring, steady, and comforting, a perfect counterpoint to the long, tense hours of darkness that had preceded it. He rested his hand on the gate once more, feeling the warmth and solidity beneath his palm. It had been his silent companion through the night, steadfast and unwavering, guiding him with its quiet presence. Now, in the bright light of morning, it seemed almost to recognize his effort, acknowledging the patience, attentiveness, and calm endurance he had demonstrated. Ulrich traced the grooves and scratches on the metal and oak, sensing the lineage of watchers who had stood here before him. Birdsong floated from the trees beyond the moat, mingling with the castle's subtle rhythms into a gentle, peaceful melody. The air carried the sense of dew, earth, and faint smoke from distant fires, grounding him further in the present. Ulrich inhaled slowly, letting each detail, each sound, and each scent anchor him fully in the moment. He exhaled with a soft sense of satisfaction, feeling the quiet triumph of his vigil settle deep within him. The night had passed, leaving only the calm strength, enduring patience, and serene awareness he would carry with him into the day. The castle, the gate, and the courtyard seemed to affirm his presence, and Ulrich stood quietly, fully attuned to the gentle, steady rhythm of life surrounding him. The courtyard was drenched in late morning sunlight, warm and gentle, casting long, soft shadows across the stones and the gates, iron and oak. Ulrich moved slowly, deliberately, letting each step settle him further into the calm he had cultivated through the night. The textures beneath his boots, the grooves, cracks, and moss felt alive in the light, and he noticed details that had escaped him in darkness. Tiny flecks of lichen, subtle chips in the stone, the faint shimmer of sun on iron. From the inner halls came the soothing rhythms of life, the scrape of brooms on stone floors, the quiet shuffle of boots, and the gentle murmur of conversation. Ulrich paused, letting these sounds fill him, syncing his breathing to the pulse of the castle. The night's tension had melted away, leaving only a deep, steady serenity. He placed a hand once more on the gate, feeling the sun-warmed iron and oak beneath his palm. The gate had been his steadfast companion through the long hours of darkness, silent yet unwavering. Now, in full daylight, it seemed almost alive, offering quiet acknowledgement of his vigilance. The scratches, grooves, and worn edges whispered of the countless watchers who had come before, and Ulrich felt a profound connection to that lineage. Birdsong drifted from the trees beyond the moat, blending seamlessly with the castle's gentle sounds into a serene morning melody. The air was rich with dew, earth, and the faint smoke of distant fires. Ulrich inhaled deeply, letting the warmth, the scents, and the gentle rhythm of life settle fully into him. He exhaled slowly, feeling the calm triumph of his vigil radiate through him. The night had tested him, yet he had endured. Standing in sunlight, with the castle alive around him, Ulrich carried the lessons of patience, vigilance, and quiet endurance into the day. A gentle warmth of accomplishment settled in his chest. The courtyard glowed with the soft, steady light of late morning, sunlight warming every stone, every iron hinge, and the worn surface of the gate. Ulrich walked slowly, savoring the textures beneath his boots, the grooves smoothed by countless footsteps, the patches of moss, the subtle irregularities of centuries-old stone. Each detail spoke quietly of patience, endurance, and quiet vigilance, reminding him of the long night he had kept. From the castle's inner halls drifted the familiar sounds of activity, the soft scrape of brooms, muted conversations, and the distant clatter of kitchen trays. Ulrich paused, closing his eyes briefly to absorb the rhythm of life. The pulse of the castle was steady, comforting, and harmonized with the calm presence he had cultivated during the night. The shadows of darkness had completely faded, leaving only the serene assurance of day. He returned to the gate, resting a hand on its warm iron and oak. The gate had been his silent companion through the night, unwavering and patient, guiding him with quiet constancy. Now, in the gentle sunlight, it seemed almost to acknowledge him, offering silent praise for his endurance and attentiveness. The marks etched into its surface whispered of countless watchers before him, a lineage he now belonged to. Birdsong floated from the trees beyond the moat, weaving with the castle's subtle sounds into a peaceful symphony. The air carried the mingled sense of dew, earth, and distant fires, grounding him in the moment. Ulrich inhaled deeply, letting the calm, steady rhythm of life settle fully within him. He exhaled slowly, feeling the quiet triumph of his vigil fill him. The night had passed, leaving behind patience, vigilance, and serene awareness. The castle, the gate, and the courtyard seemed to affirm his presence. Standing in the soft glow of morning, Ulrich carried the lessons of endurance and calm strength gently into the day, ready to continue his journey beyond the night's trials. The sun now hung high, pouring golden warmth across the courtyard. Every stone, every beam, every inch of the gate glimmered softly, alive with the quiet energy of day. Ulrich walked slowly, his steps deliberate, letting the textures beneath his boots, the worn grooves, the mossy cracks, the smooth edges of centuries-old stone anchor him fully in the present. The castle moved around him with a soft, steady rhythm, the faint scrape of brooms, muted voices exchanging greetings, and the occasional distant clang of utensils in the kitchens. Ulrich breathed deeply, letting the harmony of life settle into him, the echoes of the long night fading gently into memory. The lessons of patience, vigilance, and quiet endurance had taken root, becoming part of him, steady and enduring. He paused at the gate, resting a hand on the iron and oak one last time. It had been his companion, his guide, and his silent witness through the night. Now, bathed in full sunlight, it seemed almost alive, acknowledging the calm strength and quiet triumph he carried. The scratches and grooves in its surface whispered of countless watchers before him, their presence now intertwined with his own experience. Birdsong floated clearly from the trees beyond the moat, blending with the castle's rhythms into a soft, soothing melody. The sense of dew earth and distant hearth fires filled the air, a gentle affirmation that life continued steadily, patiently, and serenely. Ulrich inhaled deeply, letting the morning fill him completely. He exhaled slowly, a soft smile touching his lips. The night had tested him, but he had endured. The castle, the gate, and the courtyard bore witness to his vigil. And now, as the day fully embraced him, Ulrich carried the quiet triumph, the calm strength, and the gentle lessons of the night forward with him, steady and serene. Thank you for staying with Ulrich through his night at the castle gate. Together, we witnessed the stillness, the quiet tension, and the gentle triumph of endurance. As you carry this calm with you, allow yourself to rest, to breathe deeply, and to let the serenity of the story settle around you like the warm morning sun on stone. If you enjoyed this journey, remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment, especially letting us know where you're watching from, whether the US, Europe, Canada, or elsewhere in the world, and what time of day it is where you are. Your presence is always appreciated. Now, let the castle's quiet strength, the gate's steady vigilance, and the gentle rhythm of Ulrich's night guide you into your own peaceful rest. The end.